duties. Just a document in our agenda from last time.
So I'm going to go ahead and actually, because I have that pulled up, I'm going to drop the link in the chat box so you have it easily accessible. Lauren, do you want to go through those?
Sure, happy to. So let me preface it with, I realized that when I was an ESE contact, apparently it was the dark ages before Google Drive. So I needed to find a flash drive that had all of my information on it, and I still have yet to find that. So I recreated my end, but I also worked with one of an ESE contact who just left a high school and got her caseload duties as well. So I linked both there. So I'm happy to kind of walk you through each of them. Do you want me to share my screen or?
You want to share your screen?
Sure.
Gordon, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I see that Karen McFarland also put in some information into that agenda as well for us to link to in Google Docs. Karen, I think you might need to provide access, universal access to people with the link. I clicked on it and it says that I needed to request access.
Okay, I remember I struggled. Are you hearing me? I have to ask that question based on last time. You hearing me?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so I had problems doing that, so I sent it to Miss Ramos Cruz, and she's the one who uploaded it. So I can send it to you independently.
I added the link, but can you change the rights on it, because I'm able to view it, but nobody else is. So
Okay.
the link is there. If you can go ahead and just change the permissions on it, on the actual document.
Okay.
And Ms. McFarland, just going to share, and then all the way down, you'll have to share it with anybody with the link, because I have access to it too, which means anybody within the school district has access. I just think those who don't have a school district address right now need, anybody with the link will need it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to go through this now? Okay. Sorry, my computer is a little slow right now. So this was actually a document that I got from a contact who just left a comprehensive high school. So she outlined, she called it a lead teacher instead of a case manager, but it was the same kind of roles and responsibilities as a case manager. She just kind of changed the verbiage. Do you want me to go through each one or just kind of summarize, or? Yeah.
Lauren, maybe a little additional detail will just help. I know Justin, I think he was out sick when we had this previous meeting. And so that'll probably give him a little better window on what the things are that we had talked about and where some of that discussion had gone, just as quickly as you can.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, from my perspective, last time we really kind of talked about how the role of a case manager is very dependent upon the campus, right? So typically the ESE contact at each campus kind of, or if there's an administrator over ESE, they really design what this looks like on each campus. And dependent on how that is designed and outlined, and if there is a system and a structure for that on a campus, it's really, you know, the roles and responsibilities of that position are very different, right? So, again, this document that we're looking at right now is from an ESE contact who was very experienced on a particular comprehensive high school campus, and she really, you know, used it as kind of the point person for the child who, you know, the students who are on that caseload. They're the point person for other teachers to come to collect data, to ensure that the compliance piece of the IEPs are done, right? So goal reports are sent home, copies of accommodations, consultation logs are completed as outlined on the IEP. this talks a lot about the communication, right? Being that person that's kind of the liaison between special educators, related service providers, and general education teachers. Since this is a high school, there's a lot of emphasis around the transition assessments, path to future. So that was a piece that was on here as well. And then really, and I really actually love the first one. Personally meet the students on your lead teacher caseload, because that's really important that they know who to go to and advocate. Say some of the students might need a schedule change, or might have an issue, or want to advocate for certain services or on their IEP. They would be the point person for that. Anything else? Do you want me to go to the next one? Is there any questions? Karen?
I think that's the same thing that I sent because I think I know who you got this from. So it looks very familiar and looks similar to the one that I sent. May want to double check both documents because it's the same thing.
And what I did with Ms. McFarland, what I did was I made a copy of your document, and then I just shared it out with a new link. So everybody should have access to it now.
Okay.
Okay, do you want me to switch to the other one that I linked in?
Sure.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Let me just zoom in a bit. Okay, so this one again was one that I had, but I recreated based on what I could remember. But for the one that you're looking at right now, I really gave the teachers who were my ESC teachers on my team the autonomy to create their own caseload. So that's kind of why the language is a little bit different. What we would do is we would meet as an ESC team during that preschool week, and we would look at schedules, and we would create our own caseloads versus on schedules. So I think I shared last time, when I took a position at a middle school, case management was a very stressful part of the teacher's position and day. And I spent some time trying to kind of like digging into that. And it was really just lack of a system and a structure for case management. So the way that it was designed was, we looked at schedules, and we would have teachers select students for their caseload that was someone that they were teaching core academic content to, right? Now, with that said, and we would create it equally, right? I also had them really pay attention to when IEPs and reevaluations were due, because if not, some teachers could say if they had 30 students on their caseload, they may have 20 IEPs due in a month, and that is very laborious task, right? But if it's spread out and there's, say, 3 IEPs, 4 or 5 IEPs due a month, that's much more manageable. So that was something that you can see that I outlined that I felt was really important, to make sure that there was a lot of intentionality around who the students were that were on the caseload, and that, we paid attention to their IEP and reevaluation dates. And then I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. It's not as in-depth as the other one. But again, this is more outlining the process of the teachers selecting the students that they were going to be the case manager for.
Go ahead, Gordon.
And this would fit, Lauren, this would fit that piece that we were talking about of having the teacher who's working with the student more directly involved on some of this, but limiting then the total access to a degree that it becomes a manageable load for the teacher to do the necessary paperwork while still meeting the student's needs in class, given other constraints. Correct?
Right. Yeah. Because if you're teaching the student, that data collection piece is going to be hand in hand and present level. So if you don't know the student and you're not part of that process, it's a lot more work to try to gather data, to send out observation forms, to collect all of that information for a student that you're unfamiliar with. So this was a way that we really were able to reduce the amount of extra, right, work that these individuals were asked to do.
May I interject on this? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, the only thing that I have a concern with the 25 to 30 students on a caseload is that I'm not sure how other high schools do it, but as far as the high school that I'm at, they are not working hand in hand with the master board because a lot of times we have students that are not our students, and I think that should be looked at early on in the year before the school year, actually during preschool, so that the case manager is not just handed randomly students that they're not familiar with. And I think it has something to do with the master board being completed. So I don't know if this is the right conversation or the right time to have that conversation about that. But we get students that are not our caseloads, and sometimes some IND teachers have maybe 15 students, where versus other teachers have 40, 50 caseloads. So I'm just wondering if that has something to do with the master board, and if it could be implemented in the beginning of the preschool year, so that it does look something like what you were just talking about, Lauren, as far as having students that are on that you're familiar with, that you're pushing into, or you're working with directly. So did that make sense? Did I just go all over the place with that? I'm just trying. I think the master board has a lot to do with how these kids are aligned with your caseloads.
Do we have any additional suggestions? Because I know that I hear a lot, the information going back and forth in terms of what your caseload consists of, in terms of your role responsibilities, what those duties look like, and what the structure of the day is. But when we're looking at all of this information, where does that lead us? Where do we stand in terms of moving forward with the information we have received and reviewed? Because the purpose of our joint study is to look at the assignment and the working conditions of these employees that are performing student support duties as a case manager with a specific caseload. What do we see in terms of suggestions that can be made to change those working conditions? So one of them is, I heard somebody say, perhaps we need to look at the master schedule. Lisa?
I know I wasn't here last time, so I apologize, and I'm in my car, so my camera's not on. But I think it seems what we have to streamline, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we have to have our case managers, whether you call them caseload managers, whatever that title is. What we're hearing is that people are given students to support that they don't provide a service to. So what it sounds like we need to do is say, hey, schools, when you're divvying up your caseloads, we need to make sure service providers are supporting the students to be able to write IEPs effectively, to be able to get data. Is that what I'm hearing? Kind of, we need to streamline that process for schools? Is that accurate?
I agree with you, Lisa. Sorry, I agree with you, Lisa. I think recommendations for a structure and a system that kind of go hand in hand with master board planning
Right.
and is really important. And I really think that can alleviate a lot of pressure. I know that just left a school where we were doing master board planning and case management came up, and the principal was sharing that what she does is give one Friday a month for case management duties, and a part of that day is built into the board and built into schedule so that they have time to
Right,
do
because that
those.
is a big issue, is where do I find the time to make sure I'm
Yeah,
entering
so
data, I'm able to develop IEPs. It's a layered kind of concern, because it's not just who you get on your case. It's about then how do I collect the data? How do I develop the IEPs? And how do I make sure everything is being met for that kid, right?
Right.
So it is a systematic approach. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think we can provide really concrete recommendations around a structure to where, this can be something that is more feasible than, a really
I really
cumbersome
do.
task.
I agree. I think it's just steps. Step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do this. Step 3, you do this. And it's like a guiding doc for the schools to follow to divvy up roles and responsibilities of what those people are to make sure everybody has equal weight in the responsibilities. Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
Don't apologize. This is an open forum. That's the purpose. Justin?
Thank you. Yeah, I think so fundamentally, if this is something that exists, which it does, there needs to be structure that's agreed upon contractually. 2, if this is an extra title that comes with extra work requirements and obligations and time, the district needs to give considerations, whether that's financial considerations in the form of a stipend, whether that's time considerations in the form of guaranteed 1 day a month, 2 days a month, things like that. Because at the heart of this, and one of the reasons why we raised this issue, is that there is no such thing as a case manager in our contract. And as such, fundamentally, if grieved, if an employee was given those extra duties and that extra assignment, the district has no contract language to stand on. It's basically a fabricated position with additional responsibilities, very important responsibilities, but in terms of the contract, it doesn't exist. So if we're inclined to move forward with structure for codifying an additional title that carries additional workload, there needs to be a codification of consideration, if not compensation as well. Because it just, right now, what would happen if somebody was told they were a case manager at a work site and they said, no, I refuse to do that? The district could not compel them. This is a mutually beneficial impetus that I think we put forward, and we're happy to work with the district on that. If this is a real thing and people can be forced to do it, then there has to be structure and compensation or consideration. That's kind of, at least for me, that was always my crux behind this. The job has to get done. It just can't be done off the books, which seems to be how it's handled now, because there is no formal reference for people to make, to go to see what should they do, what should they consider. It has to be a formal thing, not an unofficial thing, which is how it's kind of ran right now.
So Justin, I know you and I come from different lenses, so I do want to recognize that as I respond to that statement. Did you have a chance to look at the first session and how we defined all of this?
I have not yet, no.
Okay, so very quickly, as you know, ESE teachers are responsible for the students they serve. There are many students who are on consults, so they don't get direct services. Part of the service they receive is monthly consultation between the ESE teacher and the gen ed teacher. So there's no real direct service required. So that creates caseload, which creates sort of a case manager position, because many of these kids who these teachers don't know directly is for reason, because the IEP doesn't require that. So I wouldn't define this as additional duties. I would define this as their duty as an ESE teacher. We talked about a support facilitator not having lesson plan responsibilities, grading responsibilities, that kind of thing, where a teacher who has direct instruction and a self-contained class has all of that. But those self-contained teachers, from my understanding, don't have the additional caseload that the support facilitators have when they get defined as a case manager. As a support facilitator, and I could be wrong, and this all varies from school to school, as we've already established. So I just wanted to give some of that context, because this in many cases, if not is all that I'm aware of, this is part of their job duty as an ESE teacher. And I just wanted to give that context.
Understood.
Sarah?
I just wanted to share as an ESC contact, I think one of the things that a lot of campuses probably benefit from is those extra duty days that we get at ESC contacts get at the beginning of the year. And that is when I spend the time to set up my caseload for my teachers. But it does take a lot of time to get it set up because, you know, obviously, especially at secondary, you have to like align where those teachers are supporting. But as Kevin said, teachers often get students that they don't know because either they don't get a direct service, or in cases like us, we didn't have any like district SLPs for a while. We just had contract SLPs, and I had to like get them with those students with a person. But that does happen. But I think that ultimately it just does take, like, it takes time for especially like ESC contacts to set up those caseloads very carefully. And I definitely think we benefit from those extra duty days to get that set up. But I just thought I would share.
And I also wanted to add to that what Kevin just said, the support, because the ESC teacher can play 3 different roles here. They can be the ESC teacher providing direct instruction. They can be the support facilitator where they're supporting, pushing into a classroom as well and pulling out. And they can also be the case manager. So that's actually 3 different job descriptions that could be. Now, if you're doing consult for a kid, you're not necessarily pushing in. You're just seeing that kid once a month or however the IEP requires them to see the student. But at the same time, though, you're not just doing the consult. You may be a support teacher supporting classes, pushing into classrooms, and at the same time, you're the case manager for other kids as well as that kid. So it's still more than one job, even though that's a part of the, as you said, part of the job description or job duty. You're still responsible for doing 2, sometimes all 3 of those tasks. In some cases, some teachers are doing all 3. Some cases, some teachers are doing maybe 2 of those items, support and being the case manager. Never ever is there a time where you're only doing case management. So to, just to take that into consideration, you're not, even though that's supposed to be our job to do that, we're still doing 3 different jobs as a ESE teacher, which, I don't know how that looks in other counties, but we're still responsible for taking care of 3 different tasks, maybe at least 2 different tasks, maybe 3.
Thank you. Lisa, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to share and express that I do agree with Kevin. When we go to school to be special education in that role, we know our role is developing IEPs, right? That's where our expertise comes. I think that is part of our duties as assigned as being an ESE teacher, right? We go into there knowing that we're going to be needing to collect data. We're going to need to develop IEPs. I think, again, what this goes back to is developing a system to make sure what we have to do as ESE teachers is designated the right way, given the appropriate supports and knowing how to create a system. Because that is our role as an ESE teacher. We go in, we support, we work on goals, we collect data, we do what we need to. So there are different levels, of course, depending on what the kid's needs. We have to service based on what that child needs. So there's always going to be variance in what we do to support kids from campus to campus. No campus is going to look the same. It's not going to be the same. It's unrealistic for us to think that every campus is going to be the same because of what that campus holds on. IND versus ASD versus EBD, 3 different dynamics, all special education.
Thank you, Lisa. That was all discussed in the last meeting too, so it's perfect to tie that back in. every school has different training, different staff that has different training and experience. And based on that experience and training and resources that are available, that's in the last meeting, how we discussed that it looks a little different on every campus because the dynamics are different based on staffing and needs and programs that are available on each and every campus. Sorry, Danica, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I apologize because I wasn't in the last meeting, but yes, Kevin, I was actually going to reiterate, based on those different campuses and those different programs, that drives what these ESC teachers will need to, how they service those students and what needs that they provide. But as Lisa stated, when you're going into this role, you already know that there are certain things that are not necessarily codified in your job description, but that come with the role of being an ESC teacher as part of being an ESC case manager or lead teacher, or however you call that role. It is still a part of the position because it comes with a different level. It's just like when you think of a gen ed teacher, we know that they have the lesson plan. So do ESC teachers. There are certain things that are just not anomalies to the position. It comes direct with that position. If you're a teacher, you're going to teach, you're going to plan, you're going to make sure that you're providing instruction. That doesn't change as an ESC teacher, just the functions of how you provide those services do, depending on the level or the needs of the students that you may be adjusting. But also, as it was previously stated, a lot of this does stem based on the needs of the school, because each school is different. Each school has a different populace. So therefore, that also drives how each school structures not only their master board, but also scheduling of those students. So when they're looking at those scheduling, because I know as an ESC contact in middle school, much like Lauren Perigine, I would also sit down during preschool with my ESC teachers, and then we would present the rosters, and then they would, based on their schedules, then identify the students based on those courses that they were already going into or teaching, then address the students that they needed to put on their caseload so that they can have maximum time to provide those services with those students. And it does become, we do have those students where you're not necessarily seeing them. They may be on console, but you have to make it a purpose and be intentional about checking in with those students.
Go ahead, Justin.
So I think these are the types of examples that I think would need to be codified, which are the identified best practices on campuses that are employing them. And I think that, like, if you're on a campus where ultimate consideration is given and ESC teachers are consulted and the master board is configured the assignments of the students based on the master board, that's the one of the fundamental aspects of what we're striving for. I think we're in agreement, is that campuses where they're having issues should look to those best practices, and they might have to be spelled out because there's got to be a reason. It might just be lack of awareness that some campuses have, a perfectly humming machine, and some other campuses might have a less than a humming machine. So yeah, like these are good examples of best practices that might ought to be codified into processes that go along with assigning these cases to quote unquote case managers. So I do appreciate all that.
I could say I like that, even though I'm not in there anymore. But that one of the things I struggle with is the lack of control. I did not have any control over what is assigned to me, and then juggling. For me, it's sort of unique, juggling 3 preps. No control, losing planning times, especially like during the testing season and all of those stuff. And for instance, when a teacher leaves, then that teacher's workload is dispersed amongst the rest of us. So there's so many things that happen to make you to the point where you see we struggle to keep teachers in ESC. And I think the point of this is to try to figure out how we can fix and address certain issues so that we do not have so many people or so many teachers leaving ESC, because it is a struggle, even with the workload, with the amount. Even at my campus, when I was there was rarely a support facilitator only. So everyone who did support facilitation had some level of planning and teaching a class to do. So that was the campus I came from. So you don't have someone who just do support facilitation only. So there's always a struggle, the lack of time. You don't know what to do, when to do, what to do. So if we can make it easier, and I like the fact that for these two ladies, these two coordinators, you involve the teacher in the planning and the distribution of the caseload. My previous school, you just get a caseload and it could add. And sometimes when you think that you're finished with your caseload, if a child comes into the school, then you're given a caseload. So those are some of the things that I think we need to work on, so that the teachers are not really frustrated and wanna leave. I'm now in Gen Ed. I loved ESC when I did it, but even though I have over 100 and nearly 140 students, I would prefer to have the 140 students, because it's less pulling of ear. I'm focused. I know what I'm going to do. With ESC, you're not focused. You're all over the place.
So we have another meeting scheduled for April 15th. Is there anything specific that we need to bring back to the table in order to come to some kind of a solution? Any additional data, feedback? Maybe we can look at other aspects of the case manager role on the campus as it pertains to the ESE teachers. Lisa?
Well, kind of taking what we said, if we're saying that we need to provide some sort of guidelines, is that something that the team would talk about here, of what potential guidelines, or do you take what we said and then come to an agreement on the backside? Do you know what I mean? Like, what does it look like moving forward?
Well, our goal right now, because this is just a really nice platform to have these open conversations. So if we're looking at any kind of guidance documents, then we would determine, from the district side, what kind of guidance document, and maybe that's something that we can bring back to the table to CTA. CTA says, well, you know what, perhaps during the negotiation sessions, maybe this is something they want to bring it up, whether through a guidance document or something else, or perhaps they want to bring additional information for us to consider during our joint study. And that's something that we can continue to elaborate on during either this session or the following session. But I want to make sure that if there's anything else that we need to capture, just to kind of come up with a resolution within our joint study, that we do that. So if it's a joint document or a guidance document, perhaps that's one of the recommendations that we can bring forth. And if we've come to that decision from the district side,
Okay.
and then from the CTA side, obviously you'd have to come up with your end game here.
As a teacher, I thought we should have ESC teachers should have protected planning time. In the sense that I know at some schools you have 6-period planning. If you only have one planning, how do you do the other work that you need? So I think that they should have. It would have been beneficial to have protected planning time, so that they are not assigned so many stuff to do, and then you because you did not have the planning within the day to do your work, then you have to resort to going home and doing IEPs, or in the morning, early morning, late at evening, during your lunchtime. You have to do it. You need the time. You need time. They need time to do it.
And I just want to mention some things that were said. As an ESE teacher, we all know that when we signed up to be ESE teachers, we know that we signed up to do the work. And as a general ed teacher, we know that we signed up to do the task. But what what is missing here, I think, is that as an ESE teacher, we're doing the work. We're not, we're doing it to the best of our abilities with all of the responsibilities that we're given. But I just want to keep in mind that as an ESE teacher, that doesn't um, isolate you as to being just an ESE teacher. Somebody said it, Danica and Karen, we also are general ed teachers as well. So yeah, we're ESE teachers, but we're also gen ed teachers that's doing IEPs, doing lesson planning, doing case management, and doing support. So that's not, to me, that's not just isolating us as an ESE teacher. We're responsible for doing all of that. So just when we plan or whatever, just keep that in mind, because there are teachers that are doing direct instruction, that's ESE, and they're also doing support, and they're also doing case management. So they're not isolated just as an ESE teacher. So we're getting a double hit here, and that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think that we should, if one of the solutions that I feel is that in order to correct this, is just to have just isolated, where if you're an ESE teacher, you're doing ESE only. You're not, I don't know how that could happen, but we're not doing direct instruction where we're teaching a class, maybe 2 or 3 classes, and then the rest of the day we're supporting and then doing case management. That's not what gen ed teachers are having to do. So why should the ESE teacher have to do that as well, even though we signed up for ESE, but we're still teaching a class? So I just wanted to just throw that out there, because that's not, this is it's extra work for the teacher, and it's more than what we bargained for as ESE teachers. Just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Hazel. Justin, is there anything you want us to consider from your end?
No, I think that's whether it's from the district side or from the CTA side, I think a collection of best practices that could be discussed in this forum and derive some sort of consensus, if possible, on individual practices to say, this uniqueness of each school site aside, this is a practice that really would benefit every school site in terms of designing their caseloads and curating their caseloads to employees, or dedicating time, whether it's one Friday a month, like what was mentioned, or what was just discussed, making sure that there's ESE teachers, depending on what they have in a given year, that they wouldn't be assigned a regular rostered instructional class on top of what the majority of the time is, which is servicing ESE students. So I think the more ideas that either side, or even better, both sides think would be beneficial, no matter what site, the better that could be used to kind of sculpt or craft what's happening at every site to be as accommodating as possible, so that these employees can get the job done and not feel overburdened to the point that it could reflect, in their work, that they're stretched thin, or they feel that they're stressed out, or they're not getting the support they need because they're juggling 2 or 3 different hats at one time. So I just think that the more ideas, the better. And then once they're kind of boiled down, if we walk away with a handful that are universally of benefit, that is a great start to kind of an equitable solution to some of the concerns revolving around case management.
Is that something that, does the committee agree that we could gather those suggestions, kind of streamline those suggestions? I know, Lisa, you threw some things out there that would be reasonable for our April 15th date to come back with. And that way, by the end of that session, we walk away with a better idea for how to approach the case manager duties.
I mean, I think, Lauren, you shared like what already drafted thing, right, of what was done previously. That's what you were sharing. I was driving when you were doing that. I apologize. Right?
Yeah, like those were when I was an ESE contact, what I used, to facilitate the process at my campus. And then another example from another high school. I definitely think, I have some ideas. I'm happy to collaborate with
Maybe
others.
perhaps
I
like some kind of like
prefer,
suggested best practices.
yeah. So I don't know if we could start like a collaborative document or something. I'd
So
love
do
to get
we,
feedback from as many.
do we solicit input from secondary ESE contacts and give everybody input rather than, Lauren, thank you for all you've done to be able to get something going, but we would want to make sure that those who want to be represented are in this discussion. And I'm sure Justin and Gordon would agree with that, just making sure that as many teachers and coordinators. So I don't know if we want to do that with a shared doc, and just get people going to provide input and suggestions. I'm willing to support that in any way anybody suggests or supports.
What if we did a survey? That way we can have it on an Excel, right? We can
I
just
like
do an open-ended question and then we have their responses right there and we can put it out to all our regions, and whoever responds for the secondary contacts. And then we get more information that way.
Well, I think we're going to, just based on what I'm hearing from both McFarland's, we should get teacher input as well. And not just the ESE contact.
That's what I'm
but the
saying. Like
ESE
we can put
teacher.
it out to, yeah.
We can put it out to
Secondaries.
ours, and then CTA can put it out to the same group through their correspondence, and we can make sure that everybody gets access. I agree, Lisa.
Yeah, teacher input is very, very much important. And one thing when Hazel and myself, we were co-chairing the ESC committee, the teachers, I don't know how you're going to get buy-in, but they somehow have a fear of putting their names to, or not necessarily a name, but responding to anything because they get suspicious.
We
They don't want
have
to get in
collect
trouble.
emails. Yeah,
We
we
don't have to
collect
collect
identifying
emails.
the
Yeah.
information. Yeah,
Even
that's
though
okay.
you tell them that, that was my thing. They won't. So think of a way, maybe another alternative if we don't get the response, or we just go with what we have, as you said.
If people want change, they're going to provide feedback. If they're really feeling strongly about their position and they would like any improvements in any part of their position, they're going to provide the feedback. There's no other way for us to determine, the best approach to the situation. There's so many things to consider. So if you can get that started from the district side, and then we'll share it with CTA, and then CTA, if you have any feedback for that form, any additional changes, and then we can get it out to our side and you get it out to your individual stakeholders. And then we can review that data and see what we can come back with. We say that's a good approach. All right.
We'll go ahead and share that out with constituents.
Okay.
On our side as well.
Perfect. So Kevin, I can get that from your team.
We will work on it. Yes.
And count me in. I know you're the guru, but I'm always happy to help. So
Thank you. We appreciate that. And
all right,
what we may need help with, Dee, is when we get all the results back, trying to pull it all together and make sense of it and organize it to be able to bring back. And we can open that up to everybody, but I think we're going to need support with kind of formatting it to make sure everybody's input's considered.
count me in. I'll be happy to help. All right. Well, with that, I will go ahead and let you all get back to the rest of your day. I know Gordon has some business with a taco place. So I hope
That's
all
my
of you.
kitchen.
Huh?
That's my kitchen.
Nice. That's amazing. Well, I hope all of you all have a very, very good rest of your day and week ahead. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.